Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone, and welcome to this Litepanels webinar, where today we'll be focusing on the Apollo wireless DMX and networking system. I'm Michael Herbert, I'm the product manager for Litepanels, and ordinarily, I'm very keen to have an audience to talk through our latest lighting developments, but today is going to be a little bit different. I'm joined by two people who you'll soon see are far more qualified to talk about the Apollo system than I am. So I'll be in the background to ask any questions the audience have, and I'll try my hardest to keep up with what's being discussed. As a quick overview, many of you will already be familiar with the Apollo bridge. You know, it's a reliable, responsive, long-range wireless control system, compatible with any DMX lighting device or controller. It's able to translate between multiple lighting communication protocols. For example, it can convert from SACN and ArtNet to DMX 512. And ultimately, whether wired or wireless, the Apollo bridge can seamlessly merge into any setup to become your simplified central point of control, either through the board or through the Litetions app. Anyway, today I'm joined by Tim Duff, who is the Litepanels technical sales manager, responsible for selling our lights and control systems into our Cine customers, but he's also the co-founder of Litetions, the company that created the Apollo. And with Tim, we also have Choy Boyar. Dan is an IATSE Local 52 television and film lighting programmer who's used the Apollo extensively recently on the sets of Younger. So a warm welcome to both Tim and Dan. Thank you very much for joining me here today. So
thanks.
Thank you. To the audience, please type any questions you have into the chat. And also remember that we will send around the slide deck afterwards for future references. But before I hand over to Tim and Dan, we're going to have a short clip that will show you some overview and highlights from season 7 of Younger.
Liza Miller, will you marry me?
Oh my God. Did she say yes? Are they engaged? I just heard the news.
I'm impressed that Chaz was so romantic.
Something like that. You think it's a mistake to go back to Millennial?
And piss off a bipolar billionaire after she agreed to fund your company?
I have decided to stay put at Millennial.
So you're running home to daddy, okay.
All right. So I'm just going to hand over now to Tim and Dan to start the discussion.
All right. Well, yeah, really fun show. 7 seasons. Great work on that. Really a great looking show as well. Dan, thanks again for joining us. I'd love to kind of just start and, you do a show like this, you're shooting on location a lot. You're in a soundstage where you have multiple sets. Believe you had like 5 to 8 sets on any kind of given episode within the stage, and you're the lighting programmer, so you're responsible for controlling everything. Multiple universes of DMX, tons of lights. I'd love to kind of just start by hearing what some of the challenges are that you face and what goes into that. Now, you do have some slides that you were able to kind of prepare for us, so I'll just kind of pull those up so we can have a little reference to what you're speaking about. Yeah, please, let's hear a little bit about how you go into a show such as Younger.
Sure. Well, I got to make the distinction between film and television. Film and episodic television are quite different from anywhere else you would use maybe like DMX lighting. So let's say broadcast television, live event, concerts, anything like that, because we are working with multiple sets, sometimes simultaneously, different locations, multiple locations, and the lighting package always changes. So instead of working with just one venue, we have many, many venues and sets. Depending on size of the show, you may have different crews running at the same time, different shooting crews on the same day. So it can be very, very challenging organizing the lighting package and all the data. So that's really the biggest thing. In the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years, but mainly the last 5 years, when we have a proliferation of so many LED fixtures, data management and in for lighting networks in film and television has been more important than ever before. It used to be just, you had a soundstage, you would have a bunch of dimmer racks going to a board, and you may have a few universes of conventional dimming, and that's about it. But nowadays, you're going to have conventional and a bunch of multi-parameter LED fixtures on your stage. So let's take an example. We have your soundstage. Well, I'm going to call it stage A. And we have, let's say, 2 universes of conventional dimming and 2 universes of LED. And in reality, with a show like Younger or other shows these days, we're really working with, at the very minimum, 4 to 5 universes and up to maybe 7, 8, 9 universes on one stage. So having a network is very, very important. So for example, so we'll look at this, and great, thank you. And we have our location truck, which has its own package. Now, there'll be lights on the truck that always stay in the truck, but then there's also a lighting package that I'll call the floor package that switches between the truck and the stage. So these are the lights we'll use every day on location and on the stage. On Younger, we used a bunch of Geminis. We also used a Felix lights, Astera products. There's a ton of new lights out there, and at the very minimum, we have at least one wireless universe connecting all of those lights. And we use the Apollo for that. So in this example, I'll call the full floor package Universe 1. So any light that moves between the truck and the stage is our everyday floor package. That'll fit on Universe 1. In some cases, we'll have 2 or 3, but on Younger, we were able to just barely squeeze it into Universe 1. And on the stage, we'll have 4 other universes.
And all those lights are mostly rigged up, right?
Yeah, those are all
just permanently
rigged
fixed.
up.
They're going to be
Those are
hardwired.
permanent stage lights, yeah. And so it's this floor package that we move back and forth between the truck and the stage. So if we're on location, we'll physically move everything, including that Apollo with that package. So and we can
So you're able to have an Apollo that kind of stays with that light that's mobile.
The Apollo stays with the package because, and that's one of the issues with Lumen Radio, the CRMX system that we use. While it's a very, very robust system, all the lights and receivers that are linked to one transmitter have to stay linked to that one transmitter only. And if you needed to use another transmitter, you would have to go through an unlinking and relinking process. So while you can have multiple transmitters, Apollos transmitting the same universe, the lights are linked to only one. So that's why we moved that one Apollo with the floor package back and forth between location and stage.
Gotcha.
And
so then
sorry,
go ahead.
No, go.
So how then do you use the Apollo differently when you're networking on the stage? Could you go a little bit more into kind of the stage setup and how you utilize, I believe you had 5 Apollos that were rigged up?
Yeah, so well, you can go on to the next slide there. So when we are shooting on the stage, we will connect our Apollo to the stage network. And you can also, with the Apollo, you can input both DMX and Ethernet. I prefer the Ethernet because it gives you full control over the Apollo. You'll be able to go into the management system and control it that way. So we will, on the side of each stage, we actually have an Ethernet switch, and we just plug it right in. So once we move onto the stage, we'll plug that Apollo into power, plug it into our Ethernet, and it's connected to our console. And that wireless universe, of which, let's say I'm calling Universe 1, that is now broadcast on the stage. Now, if we have stage B, with multiple stages, we have, let's say, some different setups here. Let's say in this situation, we'll have a rack, maybe 3 LED universes. So what I'm calling here universe 21 through 24. And I'll have a console on that stage as well. But I will also link both the consoles. So everything, all the stages are on one network. And you can go to the next slide. Yeah. So if we're shooting as B, I'll move the Apollo and that floor package over to B, connect it up, and it's ready to go, broadcasting wireless DMX to our floor package on B. Let's
So
say
you're able to basically network, have that core network that stays there on each stage, and the Apollo can just kind of basically be a portal to whatever network you need to go to when you're moving across the stages.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I like to connect our stages so I could control either stage from any console. That's not necessary, but that's what I like to do to improve the workflow, improve speed, and just have a redundancy. Let's say if one console goes down, the other can be a backup. But yeah, the Apollo will always be placed on the set as close to the lights as possible, even though it's got amazing range. That will be moving with the lights to each set, and it just plugs into the Ethernet and it just works. Once it's set up, it's just a plug and play system. I don't have to configure anything when I move it from stage to stage or stage to location. I just plug it in and that's it. So you set it up that one time and it's good to go. You go to the next slide. So let's say,
oh, here we go.
Yeah, let's say you want to shoot on both stages at the same time. You say you have 2 different shooting crews. We have a tandem unit. We have a main unit shooting on stage B and a tandem on A. And you want to split that lighting package. Well, there's a little bit of the issue, as I mentioned earlier, that the Lumen radio limits you to linking all those lights to one transmitter, in this case, that one original Apollo. But if you had a second one, you can broadcast that same universe off that second one. You would just have to relink some of those lights to that second Apollo.
Gotcha.
And this way, we can use that same floor package without having to change DMX addresses or change universes or doing anything with lights other than just relinking them to the new Apollo. And that'll allow you to shoot on both stages at the same time.
Now I have another kind of side question. When you have 2 crews at once and you're responsible for controlling, both crews and both stages at the same time, and how is your general workflow with that and interaction with the 2 crews, out of curiosity?
When there's 2 full units shooting, I'll work with one of the units and we would hire a second board op to run the other unit. Even though there's 2 consoles and they're both networked, I have different users on the consoles. So what I'm doing doesn't affect what the other stage is doing, the other board op. And so, I can lock out certain channels, certain universes, so that we would have 2 people doing that. Even though I could potentially do it, but our union workflow and our work rules dictate that they will have their own board op. Which is better too. I don't want to take directions from 2 bosses at the same time. That can get really painful. And sometimes that happens anyway because we're shooting on one set and we're pre-rigging another set. So I have 2 people telling me what to do, but we'll get through that. Hopefully, I don't have to do that too often, but that's just part of it.
Part of the job.
So I want to talk about another situation that we have sometimes. So let's say on a stage we have a bunch of practical bulbs, or in this case, let's say a bunch of desk lamps that use Astera Nix bulbs. I love these lights. They have built-in wireless. They're LED, and these bulbs will stay in these practical lamps, and they're just part of the set. They're just part of the set design. So what I would do in this situation is have a dedicated Apollo to stay on that one stage linked to that to those lights that are dedicated to that stage. You could go to the next slide. And there, yeah, there you go. So that's another situation, yeah, where having a second Apollo would be very useful. This way you don't have to absorb all of those wireless lights into that one universe. So because the more lights you have, especially that are LED, the quicker you're going to fill up universes. So I like to split them up. If it's stage only, have a stage only Apollo, and you'll be good to go.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So what about on location? So, obviously, there's a lot of things that are hardwired. When you have a stage, you have prep, so you have time to kind of, I'm sure you never really have enough time, especially these days, but you do get time to rig everything, run your network, everything's permanently installed. Now, when you go to location, you're probably, you're doing days where you might have to have a company move, 2 or 3 times potentially. So you get no setup time. You probably don't have the crew to run all the data and bring your board around. So yeah, tell me a bit about your general approach to lighting on days like that when you're on location, and how the Apollo is useful in a different way in those scenarios.
Sure. Well, the most basic locations that just require our floor package are the easiest. So whatever lights we have in the truck that are already linked to my Universe 1 Apollo that I keep on my my cart, I have kind of like a dimmer board cart. That's the easiest because everything's already patched and ready to go. They all link to my one Apollo. But if we have more complex locations or large night exteriors where we're day playing a bunch of lights, let's say in this case, we have additional Geminis, additional Asteras. We're going to have potentially many more universes of wireless. So I'll have the rigging crew go in there. They will pre-program all those lights, link them up to those additional Apollos, and when I arrive, I just plug them into my network, and they're ready to go. And that's really and that can be like very cumbersome too, because it requires a lot of communication between myself and the rigging crew, and I hope it's very beneficial on a rigging crew to have someone who's capable of DMX programming and just running a board. I'm very fortunate that on the last few jobs I've been on, I've had such a position, but you're going to see more and more rigging board ops these days. I think they do that more in LA now, and we're doing that more in New York. And it's very, very beneficial to me in our workflow to just have all these lights ready to go once the shoot crew lands, and not have to do any programming or setup.
So you feel it is important for crews these days, especially younger, newer people, to make sure that they learn the ins and outs of DMX. I mean, I know in the old days it used to be a bit more of a luxury where everyone could just kind of rely on you, for instance, to know all of that and don't have to think about it. But it does seem that, it's something that with the complexity of these LEDs that, everyone has to at least have a base understanding and be able to configure these, all of these different lights that work differently, even if you're kind of within the same type of system.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no longer, you can't just rely on one guy to link all these lights, program them all. It's really anyone who works on set these days has to know the ins and outs of at least setting up a lot of these new LEDs and wireless DMX linking and unlinking, and those basics, so that the programmer or the board op can come in and just take control and do what they need to do. That. So
okay, and this leads to my next question. Yeah, what are you using to actually control the lights when you're on location, since you're not lugging that big heavy board around all the time?
No, well, there are some guys who will lug around a full console. I go with a more lightweight version. I'll use I run ETC Nomad, which is part of the EOS system from ETC, on a laptop, and I have that built into a compact cart, which I have the Apollo hardwired to.
Using the Ethernet local area
yes,
network port?
Ethernet, yeah. if I really need to go lightweight, I can pull the laptop out of the cart, pull the Apollo out of the cart, and run into the set or be somewhere much closer to the set, and just with those two things, that's all I need. The cart gives me a keyboard shortcut, and so and it just has drawers for all my tools, and I have DMX gateway in there. But essentially, it's really just my laptop and the Apollo, and that's really all I need. So that's what I showed here in the diagram. So if I have a bunch of wireless lights that are already linked to it, some have built-in wireless. If lights don't have them, I can use a lumen radio receiver, like this is a Moonlight pictured. But let's say I have a light that has DMX, but doesn't have built-in wireless, and I've run out of receivers to plug into them. Or let's say that light is too far away or somehow out of the range of the lumen of the Apollo. Well, the Apollo has a unique feature. You can come straight out with it with DMX, a cable, and plug right in, and you're good to go. And you can come out of that light and daisy chain other lights. And that can be really useful in a pinch. I don't use it often, but when I need to use it, I'm really glad it's there. Sometimes that would just save my butt when I just need that one last light connected, and then there's no other options. I'm really glad that that's there. There's no other product that has that particular feature out right now. So
I bet too, in New York City, where you have a lot of big buildings and thick walls, it can be difficult to get a clear line of sight, even with great wireless range, where you can run a cable out a window somewhere to go indoors or outdoors, and I'm sure that's another useful time when having that XLR port can save your butt, knowing how things go in the big city.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because even if you're physically close, if you have some stone walls and marble hallways, that's not great for the wireless signal. And when the gaffer wants to put that one light just in far deep background behind all those stone walls, you need some way to reach it. You can always run a cable, or let's say you're shooting on the street. It's a night exterior, but there's some lights on the roof of the building. You can just drop some cable down and you're good to go without having additional equipment such as a gateway. So the Apollos are great because it combines all of that into one box. Yeah, and then you can see in this picture that additional DMX port in the back. All right, so
let's talk about multiple controllers here.
So as I said, on the stage, we'll have sometimes two boards, and on location, I'll also have my controllers, which can be either my Nomad or a tablet running an application like Blackout, either of which can connect to the Apollo seamlessly. When I'm on the stage, I'll connect with Ethernet. And on location, I could either connect with Ethernet or just with the Wi-Fi. If I want to go super lightweight, I can use just the tablet app, like Blackout and the Apollo, and just run in there, and it'll be a super quick setup without anything else.
What is that point then? What is that point where you say, actually, what I want to do now is more complex? So now I've got to swap from using the tablet, using an app, and actually now I just have to use a console typically. What's the transition point?
Oh, it's as easy as if I'm on my tablet and I'm running Blackout, I just close out of Blackout, and then log into the Wi-Fi from my Nomad or plug the Ethernet into the console, and then that's it. There's no additional setup or configuration that you have to do. You don't have to go into the software to change anything. It's just you turn off one and you turn on the other. Very seamless.
Do you find, will you use the app to actually configure stuff, or you configure it all on a console and then you'll make small adjustments on the fly with the app, or would you typically use an app to actually set up a whole scene?
So I mean, there's two ways you can set up the scene with a console and then use an app as a remote, or you can just use an app as the full console. Yeah, it depends on your needs at the moment. You know, when you do have the Nomad connected to the Apollo, then and somewhere else, and you just need to run in quickly to look at a light physically and maybe match a color by eye, then it's good to have a remote. But otherwise, you can just use a tablet as a standalone system.
Sure.
But on those stage setups, I mean, you're obviously running everything to your console, but what it sounds like that advantage of having that wireless network from the Apollo, as well as, even though everything is hardwired to the console, you being able to run out and interact in real time. Because I mean, some people might not realize, but I mean, as a board op, you're often kind of shoved in like a closet somewhere that's kind of isolated from everybody, and you're just communicating over walkie-talkie, right? So I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, maybe a little bit more about that interaction that you get with the gaffer as an advantage to being able to just like hop out and not only work with them, but maybe talk to some people and see some faces for once during the day.
Well, on Younger, I was locked in I wasn't locked, but my desk was put into the electrical room with all the bull switches and the dimmer racks. And it was about 6 feet by 9 or 10 feet in size, and it was loud. And I was right outside the door where all the transformers. It was cold, and I was, it was very far away from the set. So yeah, when they wanted to, the only reason why I would go out was twofold. When I was flashing out the stage before we shoot, just to test lights, I would go out with my iPad running a remote, and I would, since the Apollo would be on the stage, I would use that as the Wi-Fi access point, and I would be able to control the entire rig from the EOS remote app. So I could just walk around and do that.
Gotcha.
And then while we were shooting, I would go out to match colors too, because sometimes it's difficult for the gaffer to really explain exactly which way I need to go with my colors. If let's say 2 lights are slightly off, you're trying to color match 2 different manufacturers of LEDs. So sometimes I would go out and match by eye with that tablet as well. And with the Apollo on the set and giving me that Wi-Fi, that allowed me to do that.
Great. Makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
And there it is. Bridging it all together. So this, yes, I'm really excited to talk about this topic. Obviously, this gets very much under the hood, but this idea of DHCP and static IP, please dive into a little bit more about this and how you utilize these things in networking via the Apollo. Sure.
Well, I first have to say that in order to run the Apollo, you don't need to really go into all this, because this is an advanced configuration, and the setup screen for the Apollo is actually very, very simple. You just have to tell it what you have to give it the Wi-Fi network a name and assign a universe to the output, and tell it which port to look for data on, whether it's the LAN port or the WAN port. So the initial setup screen is very, very simple, and that's all you need to know to set up the Apollo. But if you wanted to go into the advanced features, there's a unique feature in the Apollo that I just want to talk about. So I want to just briefly go over 2 different types of networks, and this is an Ethernet things. So the first type is DHCP. This is where there's a DHCP server which is running on your network, and that server assigns an IP address to every device on the network. So all the public Wi-Fi systems that you interact with, your home Wi-Fi, your home network, generally everything that you will use in your daily life uses DHCP. So any new device, it gets assigned an IP address, and it connects to the network, and it's good to go. So it's very, very easy from a setup point. You can decide how it numbers by just setting the start address, but then it just numbers each new network device sequentially from there. Not really much to it. Static IP networks, however, don't need a DHCP server running, and it requires the network administrator to manually put in the IP address into every device. So, let's say you have a couple of consoles, a couple of DMX gateways. You have to go into each one physically and set the IP address. So it's more work, but it allows you to maybe have some type of numbering system for each device. So if you have a simple network, it's not really necessary, but the more complex the network, you may want to have a systematic way to number your devices, so you know immediately what type of device it is and where it is on your network, depending on what IP you give it. So, and that could be on different subnets as well. DHCP will assign every IP onto one subnet.
So with that, just so help me understand this a little bit more, because this is really getting onto the edge of my knowledge here. So the advantage of that is you can go in and you can, when you manually assign, you can put different types of devices in maybe like groups together on the network, so it's more easy to locate them and adjust them moving forward.
Exactly. So let's say you have a bunch of DMX gateways, you can put them all on one subnet. And so with Apollo, actually, you have the best of both worlds. And this is what I want to show you right here. The Apollo has a DHCP server that will automatically assign IP addresses to new devices, but you can also assign a static IP lease to each individual device, depending on their MAC address. And this is the window, this is the configuration window that you would see in Apollo. So there's a pull down menu that says MAC address, and that'll list every network device that the Apollo sees. From there, you can assign it an IP address. It could be anything you want. So let's say in this case, it may be hard to see, but I've named this device sensor 96-02. So this is a dimmer rack, as a 96 channel dimmer rack, and this is the second one, so number 2. And if you go to the IP address, I named it 10.1.1.2. So the first 2 digits will be the same throughout the entire network, and let's say the 1 would be for dimmer racks. Everything under 1 is a dimmer rack, and then 2 would be the second rack. So you can give it your own numbers. So if you want to troubleshoot your network, if you want to ping to make particular devices on the network, see if they're connected, you can do that. And just by looking at the IP, you know what you're looking at. That's very easily set up in Apollo. So you can do that. And if you're adding new devices, let's say someone else wants to connect their phone, he doesn't have to call you and say, hey, what IP address should I use? It'll just assign a DHCP address depending on, based on the starting address that you configure it to have. So it's a very, very useful feature. This is a more advanced feature for larger networks and stages.
And I think that in itself kind of, encapsulates one of the key points of the Apollo as well, that, you're obviously an advanced, if not the most advanced user. we know this product at the moment, and you're really stretching its legs and its capabilities. But equally, even if you are, just like an individual owner operator and you've got a few lights and a small studio, you don't have to do all of this stuff as well. You can it is plug and play, as well as something that you can configure to a very specific scenario.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of the Apollo, because not only does it have all these powerful features under the hood, it can just be very, very simple to use. Yeah. So no matter what kind of user you are, it'll work for you. So this slide shows another more advanced feature. And this really applies not really to film and television as much as to maybe a broadcast TV environment. So in the lower right corner, I have my lighting network. Let's say it's a bunch of gateways, and they're connected through a switch to the Apollo. So the Apollo is basically the center of the lighting network. But let's say my console is in the control room. And it's connected to the greater studio network, which is also connected to audio, video monitoring, a bunch of cameras. You have a bunch of computers. You have a ton of different things on this same network. While it can be difficult to add gateways and everything to that larger studio network, you kind of want to keep it separate. So that's another unique feature that the Apollo has, and it has a LAN port. And can you still see my video? I'm up here.
Yep.
So so I have an Apollo here, and in addition to the LAN port here, we have a WAN port. WAN is a wide area network, and that allows you to connect to what we call an external network or an upstream network. So while everything from LAN is downstream, and it's its own local network, you can configure this to work with a larger network too, without having to work with that network's administrator and having too much trouble. So that's very useful. Another potential use for that WAN port is connecting. You can go back to that.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, you can potentially. I haven't done this. I would really like to do this, but you can connect the Apollo to your internet service provider and the internet, and using a VPN, have your console or your lighting controller anywhere in the world potentially, and connect to that Apollo and control from there. You can't, without a lot more hardware, you can't do that with any other device. So I think that's really neat, and I definitely want to give that a shot.
Well, I'm excited to hear how. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Then you don't have to be trapped in one of those boxes with a bunch of dimmers and transformers.
Yeah, well, I know that'll never happen because I'm hired to troubleshoot. Not just push buttons. This pushing buttons is 10% of the job, and 90% is the troubleshooting. So I have to be there to fix it when things go wrong.
So you've been able to use this on location just as a simple Wi-Fi bridge, using all sorts of controllers. You've had multiple Apollos in a studio, roaming Apollos that come in and out, the ability to go to a wider area network that's pre-existing in a studio or go out to the rest of the world. So you've really, seemed to find every, nook and cranny that this Apollo can be used for, which is, just great to hear. Michael, do you have any more questions for Dan? I mean, I think that's been a great overview of the various ways that he's been able to take advantage of it on set.
Yeah, we've had a question come in about the sort of the question is around the distances of the wireless that you've been using on location. It's the distances, and you kind of alluded to some of the materials, with the marble and steel and everything like that. Distances that you've been working with, and any connectivity challenges that you've had to overcome.
So distance-wise, I work in a lot of built environments. So I'm always in the interior, very rarely in just open air, ideal environments. I'm sure it performs exceptionally well in open air. I've had, well, actually, yeah, I've in open air, I've had good reception about 3 city blocks away. So 3 New York City blocks.
Wow.
That is, I don't know, maybe about 350 yards.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a long, a long way.
It's pretty far. So in open
did
air, it performs very, very well.
Did the setup dictate that you needed to do that, or you were kind of like trying to see how far away you could use it anyway?
Well, it was what we were shooting a night exterior, and the gaffer wanted to put one light a few blocks away to light up a building. We wanted to see if it worked. If not, we would have just had a technician just run the light manually, but it did work. I did put the Apollo up on a stand, so it had that additional height. So that was good, but in open air, it performs very well. Within a sound stage, no matter what stage I've ever been on, it had perfect coverage throughout the stage, no matter where I put it. Sometimes I'd put it in the corner, which is suboptimal. The best place to put it is if you're on a stage up in the grid, above the set, centered over the set. That would be the best place, the most ideal place. But since we're always moving it around, we like to just put it on the wall, on the set wall. So we'll just plug it in there and have an Ethernet drop. But yeah, we've had no real huge problems with range.
So we've just had an additional question that's come in here, which is very much connected to what we were saying. 2.4 gigahertz connection can be a problem in congested city areas. Have you had to add 900 megahertz wireless link for longer range to overcome local interference? Now, I know, Tim, we've spoken about this previously. I'm sure you'll have something that you want to say about this. Of course, the Apollo does work on 2.4 and 5G as well. And well, I'll let Tim. You can probably talk about that in a bit more detail about the engineering that's gone into that dynamic frequency hopping.
Yeah, well, just before I let Dan kind of answer the question, yes, the Wi-Fi is on 2.4 as well as 5G. Because it's Lumen Radio on the DMX side, it is just 2.4 with that wireless stream. 900 megahertz or other protocols that utilize that, and that's also something that we're looking at within the Apollo system going forward. But being able to have both the 2.4 and 5G kind of coexisting and co-broadcasting allows, with our frequency hopping algorithm, the ability to kind of weave through the traffic, so to speak, which will give you a much better latency than you would if you were just on one of those two. So you are really maximizing what you get out of using both of those bandwidths. But I'll let Dan speak to the 900 megahertz question in particular.
Sure. Actually, I had an opportunity to test the Apollo side by side with another product, the City Theatrical Multiverse, which has a 900 megahertz channel, and in a real world situation. So we were in an older building with a stone exterior, and we had both the transmitters inside. And I had the technician handhold a Lumen Radio Moonlight and a multiverse receiver, and just walk out of the building and see how far he can get with a clear signal. And surprisingly, the 900 megahertz multiverse dropped off before the 2.4 from the Apollo. I was expecting it to outperform because of that 900 megahertz. We did a walk around the building, and it really didn't have any significant advantage. at all. In fact, it was slightly worse. So I haven't tried other 900 megahertz products, just that one. But yeah, that's now in terms of other interference from, let's say, video and sound. I've always used the highest power on the Apollo to transmit. Have not heard a complaint from camera or sound, nor have I detected any noticeable interference from them. So it really hasn't been an issue on all the jobs I've been on Younger or the job I'm on right now. It really hasn't been an issue.
Are you using things
Yeah,
like
that's actually another point I actually just would like to add that you reminded me of in terms of the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz is people do get worried about, certain things kind of crushing other devices. Everything's kind of wireless now between, sound, video, there's just so much. And part of that, frequency hopping allows you to not only avoid them for your own, latency, but to stay out of the way of other things and prevent you from affecting them. So I'm glad that in the real world, that's worked out well from your experience.
Yeah, and I would do have to say, if you want to really see where the transmission is on the spectrum, there are devices out there that you can get. Again, City Theatrical makes one. It's called the Radio Scan. It's a little USB device you plug into your computer, and I don't have the screenshot right now, but when I did a radio scan, I found that the Apollo put its 2.4 gigahertz lumen radio band in a very empty part of the spectrum, and you could see where everything else is clustered, and it chose the lesser used channels in that spectrum. So you can see that with some other devices.
Are you seeing more that crews are kind of, like interacting on that more? Because I think because that's always a problem, typically people have kind of thrown their hands up in the air, but is there a movement towards more, people utilizing a spectral analyzer to see and have different departments collaborate and make sure that they can, smooth out those RF problems that come up?
There is. I haven't had a lot of experience that on with the jobs I've been on, but certainly on large live events, that's definitely a consideration. But for me so far, it hasn't really been an issue. Even when I have multiple Apollos running, sometimes people wonder, oh, you can't put them too close together. I really haven't. I've had them just right next to each other. I've had 4 of them right next to each other, transmitting effects across like a stereotubes, and I didn't see any data drops or latency in the effects. So that has been a problem in my experience either.
Got another question that's come in. Dan, what was your method for rigging the Apollo bridge on a stand?
So there's a couple ways you can do it. I don't have it with me right now, but I used a tablet mount that kind of clamped. So the case of this has these grooves. I think there's a name for these grooves, I know, but I used a tablet clamp to go around these, and a stand mounted that. But there's also a thread here.
Quarter 20.
You can mount a baby receiver to, and then you can mount that right up on a stand, just like that.
Yeah, and you find just having it off the ground will help with reception a little bit.
Yeah, and I always do. I always put it up. I think in some of my older, the other picture you had it. I always have it up on a mast. I found that a cheap boom pole always works, or just like a stand riser. But yeah,
there we go. Yeah,
it always helps. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, good to get above all the bodies. With all the water that we carry, it can interfere with wireless too. So if it's a busy set, that can definitely affect things. Yeah, wow. Absolutely.
I've got another question come in here. can we talk about about latency? Any latency issues that you've experienced at all, and whether TV lighting needs exact cue timing?
Yeah, that all depends on the show. Any latency latency latencycycycy that I may have seen is really more due to the individual fixture due to the individual fixture than an issue with wireless, because I've had some latency issues, let's say with some Astera tubes, but that's been sometimes isolated to just like a bad tube.
That's more the processor with the actual fixture rather than the wireless transmission.
Right. And for what, and those are the fixtures we use effects with the most. Rarely are you going to use wireless with moving lights, although a lot of moving lights have built-in wireless in them now as well. I think you would notice a lot more potential latency with moving lights. I don't have experience with too much with that because whenever I use moving lights, I hardwire them. But for our purposes and the basic effects that I do, which I do strobing, color changing, it hasn't been an issue as long as there's a good signal. So, Ian, yes, yeah, I'll add to that it has to have you have to have a good signal. If it's in a weak spot, yeah, you're going to have latency. Right. If it's behind physical barriers, heavy glass or stone, you may see latency. So you want to optimize the signal and the placement of the Apollo as much as possible. So one of the things I'll do if I can't, so you see pictures of my cart there. If I can't physically be with my cart close to set, I'll run the Apollo itself close to set and then just run a long Ethernet cord back to my my cart. And so I'll always try my best to have the Apollo as close to set as possible, just to avoid any latency issues. But yeah, I would say at the edge of good signal, there is some.
All right, very good. So unless there are any other questions or anything else from yourself, Dan or Tim, that you would like to mention?
No, I just want to thank Dan for walking us through all that. It was really great to learn more about the different practical applications that you found. But I leave it to you, Dan, if you have any last words you'd like to share before we sign off.
No, just thanks for having me. I hope everyone found this useful and more people get acquainted with wireless DMX and the Apollo, because we need more technicians on set knowing all this. This is not just for board operators, not just for programmers. Everyone who works on a set needs to know this stuff, so everyone can work faster and get our day done quicker.
Excellent. So Tim and Dan, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate the discussion and the sort of the depth of information that you've provided for our audience and to our audience. Thank you very much for attending another Litepanels webinar. As mentioned, the slide deck will be sent out afterwards for reference. We'll send out links to all of the materials so you can see the recording again. We've got a bunch of other we've got an actual specific case study link to this. We'll send that so people can read a bit more about it. And if they have any other questions, they can just get in touch. So thank you, everyone, and look forward to seeing you all again on the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.